In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Please be seated. Although, now that I think about it, not everybody, and you guys are going to hate me for this, I know, but Braden, Casey, and Bill, stand up for just a moment. Well, we lost Bill. He's up putting his torch away. But Braden, Casey, stand up, and when Bill gets out here, we'll make sure that he stands up. Okay, keep standing there for a second, Bill. These three guys are going to be doing something in a little bit called, we're observing something called Journey to Adulthood. They're completing a course, a program, which is something that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But I just want to get a good look at them for a minute. And guys, I'm going to be talking to you most of the time, so you can sit down now and don't be too embarrassed. It's going to get worse. But you guys are heading off to high school next year. I know this seems like weird, but you are. And because of that, I'm going to force upon you a story of when I was in high school. When I was in high school, they had this marvelous thing called study hall. It was like my favorite thing in the whole school year. You go into this hall and you study. Ha ha ha. I had this friend named Scott Lemon and me, and we never studied. We were these geeky kids who liked to write stories. And they were always the kind of stories that if you were to try to hand them in English class, you would get detention. So we just wrote them for ourselves because it was fun. And we did this all the time. But you know, the funny thing about Scott is that his dad was a Lutheran minister. So we also talked about God and stuff like that as well. And one day I said, Scott, our youth group is having an overnight. Why don't you come? And he said, great thing, great idea. I'd love to, but I got to ask my dad. Now, like I said, his dad is a Lutheran minister, and as far as I knew, Lutherans are Lutherans. They're sort of like Episcopalians, but with German. And so he went to his dad, and I discovered at that moment that there's different kinds of Lutherans. And his kind of Lutheran doesn't like Episcopalians. And so when his son said, can I go do an overnight with his youth group? He said, no, absolutely not. I will not have my son spending the night with a bunch of heathens. That was my wake-up call. That was when I sort of caught on that people build walls around themselves to keep other people out. You know, I mean, you hear in the news a lot about borders, you know, border security, border everything. We've been having border problems for as long as there have been people. We build these borders around ourselves. We try to lock people out. You know, and we've been doing it, not just countries, not just religions, not just families, but all sorts of groups and individuals themselves. We build these walls around ourselves, sort of our own little national borders, to keep everybody out. Why do we do that? What is wrong with us? When you guys finish this Journey to Adulthood program, you're going to be entering into a more mature statement of your faith, a more mature practice of your faith. And one of the things you're going to learn as you live into your adulthood is that part of the job you're given as a follower of Jesus is to break down those borders. And we're not very good at it at the church, but we're trying to get better. We forget that so often when we keep wanting to build all these borders to keep people out. You know, and sometimes we need reminders that our job is to break down those borders. Fortunately for us, we have a great reminder today in the story from the Acts of the Apostles. This is a story about Peter and the disciples, and I just keep reminding you guys that the disciples were like high school age. Peter was the oldest, and he might have been like a college-age student. So these are not old guys. My kids are older than the disciples were. And that makes me feel really, really old. But there they were, and the whole story is about Peter getting in trouble with the rest of the disciples. he did this really horrible thing, they thought. He went and he had a meal with Gentiles, non-Jews, people who were not from their country, from their religion, from their family. And they said, you weren't supposed to do that. You've really messed things up. And Peter, fortunately, had a really good answer for this. Peter said, listen, I was in this town called Joppa. You don't have to know about that place. Don't worry, there's not a test. But I'm in there and I'm praying, and God shows me a vision. God shows me this vision of this sheet coming down from heaven, and it's filled with all this food, and it looked really good, but you know what? It's also the food that we're not allowed to have as Jews. Because in some religions, there's a lot of food you're not allowed to eat. And Peter said, it looked good, but I'm not touching that, not me. And the voice said, eat it. And he says, no, I've never, ever eaten the stuff I'm not allowed to eat. I'm not going to do that now. And the voice says, if God says it's clean, if God makes it clean, don't say it's profane. Don't say it's dirty. And that's the whole point. If God says something is clean, who are we to say it's dirty? Who are we to say it's not good enough? We keep trying. We keep saying they're not good enough. But God says, oh yeah, if I say it's clean, if I say it's good enough, it's good enough. And your job is to see it too. Your job is to go beyond that. So when we build all these borders around ourselves, our job as Christians, as the people who follow Jesus, as the people who do what the disciples did, our job is kind of to look over those border walls and to see ourselves. Sometimes our job is to break down those border walls. Sometimes our job is to build bridges from one group of borders to the next so that we can join people. That's our whole job. That's what Jesus is all about. Breaking down the borders between God and us, breaking down the borders between us and each other. You know how he said that? When somebody said, what do I got to do to have life? Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And, who knows it? Love your neighbor as yourself. That's the job. It's not an easy job. It's not a job that people love. We love borders. We love to keep people out. But that's not our job. Our job is to break down those borders. Our job is to see Christ in everybody. And there's nothing easy about that. Now, I got to say one other thing about this, though. Loving everybody, seeing Christ in everybody, treating everybody as Christ doesn't mean that you make yourself a doormat, that you let people walk all over you. It never means that. Remember what Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. That means part of your job as a follower of Christ is to take care of yourself. Part of your job as a follower of Christ is to love yourself, to respect yourself, and to have proper boundaries. Boundaries aren't the same thing as borders. Borders block people out. Boundaries let you know who you are and give you the respect for who you are, so that you can expect to be treated as Christ as well. Nevertheless, we are really good at building those borders, and it's going to be a job. Remember my friend Scott and his father who thought we were heathens? Well, back when I was in seminary, I had a friend out on Long Island. And she said, that's a funny story, because I had the same thing happen. I went to this school, and I had this Roman Catholic friend. And she went to a parochial school, a church sort of a school. And one day, I said, why don't you come to church with me at the Episcopal church? And she said, I don't know. I better ask sister over at the school. So she went to the nun. And she said, sister, can I go to the Episcopal Church next Sunday? And the nun said, oh, absolutely not. But she was really persistent. She kept saying, please, sister, can I go? And so finally the nun says, well, okay, but don't pray there. If that sounds crazy, remember this. It is not that long ago that we stopped people from doing things. It was not that long ago that black kids and white kids were not allowed to go to the same school. It is not that long ago that white folks were not allowed to marry anybody who wasn't white. When my grandparents died, we found love letters from my great-grandparents. And one of the letters was from my great-grandmother, who said, I can't marry you because you're not Catholic. And then the next letter had my grandfather say, fine, I give up. I'll become Catholic. 2 generations later, you'd never think of that. It hasn't been that long. It hasn't been that long that 2 people of the same sex couldn't get married. It hasn't been that long that our gay brothers and sisters couldn't even say they were gay because they were afraid they'd lose their jobs or get arrested or worse. It's not been that long that we build up all these walls and we still do it. And what is your job? Sorry, but you have a job. To be a mature Christian, to be somebody who's growing in your faith, is to say, this is not okay. Is to say, are you okay? Our job as Christians is to see Christ in the people beyond the borders and to reach out so that when you see the person who no one else will eat with, you at least think about eating with them. And when you see the person that nobody else will talk to them. And when you see the person who nobody else understands because they're way out there, at least try to see the world through their lens. That's what it means to follow Jesus, because that's where Jesus has taken us. Jesus never locks us up in these little churches here and says, okay, everybody else stay out. We do sometimes, but Jesus never does. Jesus sends down this little sheet with all this stuff from everywhere around the world, from all these people, from all these religions, from all these cultures, and says, eat, take part, be part of that. So guys, that's your job. Your job is to break down borders. Your job is to see what's good in everything and everyone. It is not easy, but it's really good. If I could put it in one sentence, there's only one sentence I know that sort of wraps it all up, and that's words that Jesus said where he says, if you want to live, then love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's not easy. Good luck to you, all 3 of you. Good luck. But I promise if you do it, it is so worth it. Amen.